Good morning and welcome to the Crest Network. As you know, in our last production presentation, we had a production about mobilization and getting to the job site. We want to continue through the flow of the job site this morning by talking about what happens once you get to the job site. I am Scott Tarpley, and I introduced myself last week, but for anyone new, I've been in the business since 1979. Yes, a long 40 years doing that. And started out in residential, progressed over to the commercial work and equipment rental work. And that's pretty much what I've done. I've been asked to present here with Mr. Wagner and Mr. Genone on the Crest Network to bring the production side from real life experience. So my goal here during production is to tell you about the things that have happened very well and things that have made it successful, and to tell you about the things that did not go well so you can learn off the mistakes that I have made in the past. So when we're talking about equipment setup and distribution setup, we want to talk about several different things. On commercial jobs, a lot of times, the first thing we think about on water damage are desiccant dehumidifiers, lay flat distribution, and stuff like that, and how we have to set those up. Most mistakes on job setups are started in the incipient stage of the job. A drawing plan as well as a setup plan should be written and mapped out before the equipment arrives. So while the equipment's on the road, as I talked about last week, your project manager, your senior project manager is already there. Your equipment is getting loaded at the shop and getting on the way to the job site, or maybe traveling over the roadway at a slower rate than your production manager does, or maybe the production manager flew in. But you want to get there and you want to put together a plan for your desiccants. You want to put together a plan for where your lay flat is going to run, where you're going to put your generators and set up your generators. Keep in mind when you're putting all this together that you got to be mindful of fire codes, and you got to be mindful of fire exits in buildings, and just where to put stuff. As you can see in the picture here on the screen, this was a very complicated setup. There wasn't a way to do it good because, as you can see, there is no sidewalk in front of the building. It runs right up to the edge of the street, or very little sidewalk access, I should say. Runs right up to the street. Really wasn't a good way to get all this equipment in on this particular job, but these are some of the things that you're going to run into when you get ready to start setting up equipment. You also have air movers that you're going to need to set up on a water damage, air scrubbers on a water or fire damage, temporary air condition. Going to need to order a forklift. Nothing worse than waiting on equipment to arrive on a job site for about 3 hours, 4 hours, or maybe even the next morning, and you get your equipment there, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh no, I need a forklift. So you call the local forklift rental place, and they're a half a day or an all day out getting you a forklift, and then you're sitting there very unorganized. You should have a checklist for job arrival and what you need to do when you arrive on the job site. And when your checklist goes to equipment location, lay flat location, and all that, then you should make sure that you cover that and have your forklift on that. You also may need fuel and need to get that lined up. You don't want to get your stuff there, and then as soon as you run out of fuel, not have a way to fuel your equipment, or that you have not made plans to get that done. You also may need security. You need to keep people and pets and cars and the homeless people and all that away from all this equipment. As you know, during the winter when it's cold, these deskins create a lot of heat, and a lot of times you'll get a crowd in there that's sleeping overnight that like to cuddle up next to these large tubes, and causes you a problem from the safety standpoint. So. When your equipment does arrive on site, again, different things to keep in mind. Uh, Safety and hazards with equipment placement. That could be from the danger of cars running into it, as that picture on the street sort of showed. It could be safety of people and pedestrians on it. And it could be from a fire point safety. As you're looking at this picture on the screen now, how would the fire truck get in there? How would you get a fire truck through that street? Pretty much we've got the entire street blocked at this point. So remember, a lot of this equipment is coming in on large trucks, whether it's your forklift delivery, and they've got to know where to unload there. And you've got to make sure that you make room for these big trucks to get in. Um, you worry about your indoor and your outdoor safety. Again, fire exits and fire codes. It's nothing like getting a huge job set up, and then all of a sudden you figure out you've got to get all that moved because it's breaking the fire code. Uh, we had one once upon a time. We set up in Rhode Island, had 30 deskins, 30 generators, and probably 15 air conditioners on it. Took 3 days to set it up, and then the fire department came by and we had to move everything to a different location. So obviously a couple of days to break it down and 3 more days to set it back up. So don't make that same mistake. You have to leave your generators where you get have room, and your deskins to get room to get fuel to those, whether it's diesel fuel or propane. So you have to make sure when you set it up, you leave plenty of room to access those where people can get in and get to those to get them fueled. Road or lane closures or sidewalk closures, you have to worry about all that because there may be city codes that will keep you from blocking a road or blocking one lane of the road, or maybe even parking spaces. In some areas, you just have to go to the city codes department. You have to rent parking spaces for a week or a month, while you're going to be there, and they'll actually bag the meters off to where nobody else can use them, and put no parking signs up. So it just depends on where you're at, what your city and local codes are. You also may need fencing in a lot of situations to keep general traffic out of the area that you're working on uh, when you come to fencing. You also need to tell your truck drivers as they're coming in of any unforeseens that might be there. You don't want to guide them down First Street, and First Street's got a low clearance on it, and wind up in the same situation that this gentleman is in here. Uh, Obviously, his truck was 13 foot and 6 inches tall, and the bridge was 11 foot and 8 inches tall. All bridges are marked, or supposed to be marked, but all of them are not. Usually not on the bridge, ironically, but normally on a road sign about an eighth of a mile before you get to the bridge. There'll be a sign that says low clearance, and it'll tell you what that clearance is. Your legal height on semi trucks and anything you should be pulling would be 13 foot 6 inches or less. Some parkways have low clearances. They don't allow commercial vehicles on there for that reason. And then when you get into city streets, a lot of times, just as with this one, you'll have a low clearance. Now, you're not only going to be late to your job when this occurs, but you're also going to have a big wrecker bill. To get a wrecker to get that thing out, they basically have to flatten the tires and pull it back out, so the vehicle will go down a little. And you've damaged your equipment, you've damaged your trailer beyond repair. And then the engineers to come out and inspect that bridge usually start about $1 million per bridge to come out and inspect it. So when you're pulling, whether it's with a semi truck or with a smaller truck, always know the height of your vehicle. You don't want to be at the job site preparing to set up equipment and then find out your equipment's not going to arrive till the next day because of low clearance. So it's up to the project manager to try to assist in getting routes around the job that can be set up so that the people and the equipment can get into the job site safely and without causing damage. Another thing, when you get really close to your job site, you'll have flooded roads in a lot of instances because a lot of your commercial jobs happen during hurricanes and floods. The truck driver coming in, bringing their stuff in, is not going to be aware of the local surroundings. He'll be aware of the interstates and stuff like that. But when you get into your local areas, he is not going to be aware of what is going on at those times. So it's up to the project manager once he gets there is to survey the area, talk to the local police department, the local highway department, find out if there's any question what are the routes that a truck can take to get to your job site safely. We've been within a mile of jobs before and took 3 to 4 hours to find a route to get in there. Keep in mind when they're rerouting commercial vehicles, whether it's a large semi or a box truck or a truck pulling a trailer, that small vehicles can, quote unquote, turn around, don't drown. However, you don't have that luxury with a big vehicle. If you come up on this situation, you should not drive through the floodwaters. But the small cars on the top side of this picture can simply turn around and go the other way. You don't have that luxury in large commercial vehicles. They're hard to turn around in short spaces. If you get off the shoulder of the road when they're wet any at all, you're going to be stuck. You're not only going to block the traffic and block the road, but going to have a huge wrecker bill. And then most importantly, you're going to be late getting to the job site. So these are easily avoidable by simply telling your drivers, hey, this route is a normal route, but it's closed, and send them a screenshot of a map that's accessible that they can get around to get into your job site. Once you get to the job site and you get ready to park, then survey the area, know what you're doing. This is a good example of a mistake that was made that fortunately did not cost you any money, but could have been well into the multi-millions of dollars due to a mistake on this job. As you can see in the center of the screen, where the two gentlemen are standing, and then behind that, the cross on the church. And that driveway comes in straight off of the city street, and you drive straight into that. And it's a fairly long, fairly big area of parking there. In this particular instance, on this job, 4 trailer trucks parked in these areas before these smaller trucks were in here. Then if you look at the very bottom of the photo, that safety rail around, you see that that's actually on top of a parking garage. A loaded semi weighs up to 80,000 pounds, and most of them are going to be pushing those limits. So you put 320,000 pounds on that parking garage, something you really don't want to do. And even these big man lifts that you're seeing in the photos, they're extremely heavy as well for the counterbalances that they need on them. So know what your limits are, but just because it looks flat and it looks like it's on dirt, don't mean it is. It's a project manager's job when he first gets there to survey all of that and to make sure that you don't wind up in a situation like that. These man lifts that you see in the picture also need to be coordinated. You need to determine early on if you're going to need those and where you can put them and how many you'll need and how high they go and that sort of thing. Because once your crews arrive, they need to start to work, not be there waiting on equipment to arrive that you didn't order in the beginning. That's what can happen on a good day if you park in the wrong place. As you can see, this dump truck fell straight through the parking garage. He came into it and got to the one area of the parking garage that wouldn't hold him up. So that's what you don't want to happen. Not only could that kill people, it also is going to be a huge financial burden of recovering that truck and getting it up out of that hole and obviously fixing structural damage that was done. Back to this picture here, if you'll notice, these big tall buildings, they actually sit on top of these parking garages. So should a cave in that area happen, it could have actually caved the building in. So be a little bit careful. That was a unique building situation. But it's probably what saved it from caving in with those trucks on it. It's the fact that they were built heavy enough to hold the building. So don't get yourself in this situation. So another shot of that same pinnacle building that we're looking at and all the equipment there that was jammed up. The challenges on that job was limited space, downtown traffic, no access. The buildings are occupied, people wanting to get in and out, and it's a lot of chaos going on in that small right hand corner, being the only place that you can get to the building. A little closer shot of that, you'll notice on the left hand screen, it's actually a parking dock there for semi trucks, and you go down the ramp and the street level's higher than that. So there's no street on the left side of the building. It's only a 2-lane street in front of the building, one lane of which we have blocked with equipment. The other lane we have blocked with trucks that are loading and unloading. On the right-hand screen, you'll see a large Lowell forklift. And then when you look closer, you can actually see that the air conditioners in this picture and some of the deskants are stacked as much as 3 tall. Those are 7-foot tall units. So that third unit is 14 to 21 foot, up in the air from the ground to be able to stack those, just have enough space. So that's something that you want to make sure that you put plenty of attention to when you're doing it, and to make sure that you get that lined out correctly. Also, you can see the large trailer truck at the bottom of the screen, the white one with 3 axles under it. The only reason they put 3 axles under a trailer is so that when you weigh those back axles, with 2 axles, you can only go up to 34,000 pounds. So if there's more than 34,000 pounds on those 2 axles, they put a third set under it to spread the weight out. Your danger here is punching through the asphalt, even on a road surface, but particularly in a parking lot with the front dollies that go down on these trailers. And when they sink, the trailer tilts way up in the air from the back end, and those dollies go down. And you usually have to unload the trailer and get a large Class C wrecker to pick it back up. And sometimes a wrecker won't pick them up. You have to get a crane out to pick it up. It's not something you're going to get reimbursed for from the insurance company because you didn't properly stage it when you got it there. In the particular case of this trailer, that is a 2 meg generator. And if that 2 meg generator were to sink the dollies through the asphalt, then you cannot unload that trailer. So, and it is extremely heavy, and you're going to have a crane to pick it up. And then secondly, the diesel fuel tank would be in the front, very front end of that trailer. So you have a likelihood when that tilts down of it spilling diesel out. So now you've not only got to get a crane out there to do it, you've got a hazardous material situation, and the bill's going to go way up. Again, not something that you're going to be able to put on the bill. So make sure you've got in your beginning stages, again, the project manager, and you've heard me mention that a lot today, he's got a lot of responsibilities. Too often we stick our head in the door and start worrying about how to dry a building or how to clean a building. We don't stop long enough to make preparations for equipment arrival and stuff like that that we would need on a fire or water damage emergency. So in this situation, the knowing that you've got a 2 meg generator you've ordered, then you need some heavy timbers to put under the legs of the dollies so you can get those secure and not punch them through the asphalt. When you're ordering forklifts, make sure to get the proper size. Now, the equipment you've seen in these pictures that I've been showing would not, these forklifts would not pick up any of that. So you have to tell your rental company that you're getting your forklift from, you know, what you're going to be loading or unloading and how much that's going to weigh. And then in the when it comes to deskants or anything with a large footprint that's over 4 foot by 4 foot, all these lifts when they tell you how much weight they'll pick up, they're looking at a 4x4 skid and what that'll pick up. But if you get a piece of equipment that's 13 foot long and 4 foot wide, then you're going to have to severely increase that. For an example, a dehumidifier might not weigh but 3,000 pounds, but it takes about an 8,000 pound lift to lift it because it sticks out so far in front of the forks that it has a candle levering effect on it when you go to pick it up. It's always better to get too big of a forklift than it is one that is too small. Small forklifts do have their place if you're unloading equipment that is smaller or maybe out of the back of the trailer. So this particular deskant would weigh about 3,000 pounds. If you needed to unload it, then you may need to set it up on a sidewalk, a lull, which is a forklift that has an arm on it and it reaches out. Can be very beneficial when you're placing equipment because you can extend it to get over the top of the sidewalk or something like that. Need to have an experienced operator on those because if they're loaded incorrectly and extended incorrectly, you can have problems with that. The generator you see on this trailer will weigh about 3,500 pounds plus fuel. It can hold, some of these generators hold up to 300 gallons of fuel. So you're adding about close to 3,000 pounds to a generator with that much fuel on it. So just be careful when you're selecting your forklift to get one that's correct to do the job. And you got to make that decision long before the equipment arrives. On this particular job, is one that is set up a lot less chaotically than the Pinnacle building in downtown Nashville. On this particular job, there was a lot of equipment to go in the building, but the front of the building to your screen left had to be kept clear for the parking lot, for people working on the job, for dumpsters to be set, and several other things. There was no access to the back of this property by vehicle because it just was grass and trees on the backside of it. There was no access on the other end of the property because of the street and the landscaping near the other end. So we only had two ends to work with, one end and the front of the building, which is to your left, to work with. So we chose to put all the equipment in the one area of the parking lot behind it. The equipment's lined up neat and nice. It's spread far enough apart to where they could get to the equipment and fuel it and service it. And we chose on this one to go through the windows so we could leave that bottom door open for fire escape while we were working in the building. That's important to do, and important to stay where you stay friends with the fire marshal, if you will. So another thing you have to consider, and the project manager once again has a lot. He has to wear a lot of hats. He has to predict what's going to happen in your parking lot. If you pull up and look at a building and the maybe you get there after hours, or maybe they're closed because of the damage for that day, and you prepare for all this equipment to arrive at 9 o'clock the next morning, and then you get there at 9 o'clock the next morning and this is what you see. Now the employees have come back to work, or customers are coming to other stores, and you cannot get a box truck in, you can't get large trailer trucks in. There's just no room to move and no room to get around in there. The second thing that can happen here is you get there and you park your truck and you get it stationed, and then you get there the next morning and you're blocked in, you're trapped, you can't go anywhere. So be careful on those two things, whether it's at a hotel on the way to the job site or after you get to the job site. Some parking lots are configured on purpose to where big trucks cannot get in them without doing damage. That deters large trailer trucks from coming in. They don't want them in there. Apartments are a good example of that. Nursing homes and other areas, when they build their parking lots and configure the curbs and the landscaping, a lot of the time it's where big trucks can't get in. In that case, you might have to offload equipment on the street and bring it in a different way. But at any rate, you got to have a plan. Don't get in there and get blocked in and not have a plan and not know what to do. Um, so you got to plan that before equipment arrives. Again, choose your right side forklift. As you can see, this truck forklift has went in to pick up a package, and he did not have the stand under the front of the truck or the tractor still hooked to the trailer. So he tilted up and hopefully didn't get hurt. But that is a dangerous situation. It can damage the trailer if it hits the top of the dock doors, if it has an overhang. It can damage the dollies on the trailer. They're most likely to collapse in this situation. So be careful and think about these kind of things when you're unloading your portable equipment into buildings and you're using a forklift to unload it that goes inside the trailer. So just be careful and don't get in that situation. Another thing, when you get inside the building now, and we're talking about getting the equipment up to the 15th floor. What do you think it'll cost if somebody scratches that elevator door there, or that cherry panel beside the elevators? That would not be a cheap fix. So there are construction pads constructed for almost every elevator. Most of the time, what's referred to as the engineer or the plant manager there will have access to those pads. They probably already own them, and they're stored away somewhere, but they simply fit onto clips that are pre-made into the elevators. If they don't have that, then before you start lugging a bunch of equipment in and out of a very nice elevator, then I recommend you go get some pads. You call an elevator company, you tell them what you've got, you get some elevator pads put in there, or you simply construct your own protection around those elevator cars and the corners going in and out of those. These cars are very expensive, and even to remodel one on the inside, if you get it scratched, will cost you more money than you would want to pay. Check also, a lot of times they may have a construction or service elevator. Most of the time they're called a service elevator. So, look at your service elevators and um, see if they've got one of those. And most of the time they're constructed out of materials that are designed to take a beating and not get torn up. When we're placing inside equipment, always be careful. You can see equipment placed here. There's limited access to get down the hallway here, but you can see the cords all curled up and causing a trip hazard going across the aisleway on these first couple of units sitting here. Again, if you're going to be working in a building or having it occupied, then you need to take measures to tape those cords down or to flatten them out or to run them overhead to where you could walk under them, or maybe simply just plug them up in a different manner. But you definitely don't want to have trip hazards, and particularly working in a high traffic office building or nursing homes or anything like that. You have to keep that in mind. That plan of action obviously needs decided a good bit before the equipment arrives, so you're not coming back on day two solving that problem. You're solving that problem as you place your equipment, and that way it never becomes a hazard on it. So another thing to consider when you're running generators to power your equipment, or when your deskants or to power the building or for whatever, a lot of times you'll have to have fuel tanks. It's illegal to have fuel stored on some job sites without a permit. And then you have to have the fire department or the codes department come out. They'll inspect your tank, make sure it's a double walled tank. And depending on how many gallons of fuel you got there, you may have to have special permitting to be able to put it there. If you try to do that and you don't have the proper permitting, then Mr. Barney over here on the right will come in and write you a good ticket for it. And sometimes the ticket's cheaper than the permit, but sometimes it's not. I've seen them on the minimum side be $30 a day. On the high side, I've seen it to be around $10,000 per day. And particularly, I had one in Houston, Texas that was like that. So the fines can be significant. Just know your local codes and know what your availability is and how you can do that. Your fuel oil companies in the area that you would be using to fuel your tanks for you, whether it be propane or diesel or gasoline or whatever it would be, usually know these codes pretty well. In some areas, you can't even set a generator on a job site without a permit. When they're doing the permitting, they're looking for 2 or 3 different things, and they're looking at water. They want to make sure the water stays clean and we don't have any spills or anything. They're looking for noise ordinances. They're looking about fueling of the equipment. Sometimes they may want you to build a fuel dam around the generator, which basically means you'll take a waterproof tarp and lay on the ground and put the generator on the tarp and then go around it and build the edges of the tarp up, so if diesel were to spill out, that the tarp will catch it and it won't soak into the ground. So if you have a double walled tank, which most of your modern generators and things do now, that may not be necessary. Then you got noise ordinances that are particularly bad in residential areas, or if you're working in a hotel district or something like that. If your generators aren't quite run, or sometimes referred to as whisper watt generators. So when you're getting a generator or buying a generator, be aware of that situation, because you don't want to get out on a job site and have the guy come by and write you a ticket for having a generator there. So I hope we've went over a good bit of stuff today that has helped for you to be able to prepare to arrive at a job site. I think, as we've talked about mostly here, it's not about waiting till your equipment gets there and finding out what's going to happen and where you're going to put it when it gets there. The project manager should have his hands full when he gets on site. He should be making these decisions. He should be using your forms that you should already have made up of task assignment and who he's assigning to check that stuff out. So you've heard us say before, and I think Bill and Dick have both come out and said doing a commercial job is not as simple as doing a house. I've heard it said a lot of times, well, if you can do a house, a commercial job is just 10 houses. I think what we demonstrated here today is we hadn't even started the job yet. We're just setting up equipment, and it is significantly different from doing 10 houses because of the commercial nature of it, because of the size of the equipment, the different types of equipment that you have to use on it. So get those checklists out, get them available, fine tune them. And when your project manager gets on site, he's got more to do than worry about how to get the sheetrock inside the building dry. He's got to prepare for all this equipment that's fixing to arrive, all the personnel that are going to arrive, and all of the ins and outs of that. Our next seminar on the production side will follow the same suit, pretty much in order of what we do with the job. So we'll be talking about on that one of creating the scope for the job and creating a proper scope and how to document that scope and to get that going. Most of the battles that you have with insurance companies or consultants on jobs will be scope related. You didn't do it the way they wanted it or the way they thought it needed to be, or maybe you done too much, or maybe you didn't do enough. So we'll be talking on the next seminar, which is in mid-January. We'll be talking about that and continuing on till we get to that one, and then the next one will continue on. It's sort of like steps through the job site. So I hope you have a very, very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I hope this has been helpful to you. If you have any questions, you see my number there at the bottom of the screen. I am Scott Tarpley, and thank you for listening.